Ladies and gentlemen of South Florida, the Florida Panthers are headed to the Eastern Conference Final for the first time since 1996.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into the Saturday, May 13th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. And you can follow us on the Instagram front as well at LO_FLA Panthers as well. And thank you to all the everydayers who come here and make Locked On Panthers your daily podcast and to come here to get your daily Florida Panthers fix. South Florida Panther fans, as far as your hockey fandom, especially if you were born maybe even early 90s or even late 80s, if wherever your memory starts, there's something called the rule of 7, which is when you start getting your first memories. So if you are starting to get memories for the first time, chances are the first time you remember, the earliest age where someone would remember the Florida Panthers making it to the Eastern Conference Final would be someone being born in 1989. So anyone born after that point probably has zero memory of it. And the Florida Panthers, this is generations of waiting, of heartbreak, of feeling hopeless at times. And the Panthers, unexpectedly, they beat the Toronto Maple Leafs in 5 games, and 2 of them being in overtime to clinch their spot in the Eastern Conference Final for the first time since 1996. And boy, it's pure joy from my end. And I'm sure it is from your end as well if you're listening to this. But we do have a special guest here on the show. He was back here in game 1 of the Boston series to break down that game. But he is back to break down this game for the Florida Panthers and a clinching win for the Cats as they win 3-2 in overtime, and they punch their ticket to the Eastern Conference Final. The former host of Locked On Panthers, Josh Luecht. Josh, welcome back to the show on a very, very high note.
We want Florida. We want Florida. Did you want Florida? Man, oh my goodness. I mean, what?
I'm sure Leafs fans don't want them now. That's for sure.
I mean, they don't get them. They're gonna go home. This is crazy. I mean, I love that quote by Matthew Tkachuk after the game as well, telling, I think it was the TNT broadcaster, TBS or whatever, telling them, yeah, you're not hearing the "We Want Florida" chants anymore. What an incredible statement win for the Panthers, not just in this game, but in this series. They absolutely dominated the Toronto Maple Leafs, no matter what the mainstream hockey media wants you to think. They absolutely, I mean, they spanked them. Let's be honest. It's a 5-game series. They're out in 5. And the Panthers move on to the Eastern Conference Final. It's funny that you made 1989 the line in your earlier comments. I was born in 1988, so I do have a memory of it. it's kind of funny. Like I just saw a picture the other day from like that year of how small I was last time the Panthers were in the Eastern Conference Final. Oh man, it's crazy to think about. It almost doesn't feel real. It feels like one of those things where you're like, oh yeah, okay, sure. It doesn't even feel real that the Panthers are 8 wins into a 16 win goal, halfway there, living on a prayer. I don't know. It's
Yeah,
just crazy.
halfway there, you could talk about whether it's Bon Jovi or I'm going to age myself a little bit here, or that part when SpongeBob was trying to race Sandy and he says, well, I'm already halfway there, halfway there, halfway there. I'm sure Jacob Winans would definitely approve of that reference as well. But it feels it feels like a dream, and I don't want anyone to pinch me. I don't want to be pinched right now, please. Like I'm glad nobody is near me to do so, but just in this series alone, just the Panthers and of course getting up to a lead in game 1 and then playing from behind in games 2 through 4, and then in this game specifically, they got up to a 2-0 lead as well in this one. And the Florida Panthers, what they were doing in game 5 versus what they weren't doing in game 4. I mean, just in the first period alone, they had more block shots in the first period of this game than they had all of game 4 combined. So they were, and they set the tone early for this one. The Toronto Maple Leafs never led in this one. And that is what the Florida Panthers were doing as far as getting those leads, going into intermissions with leads and all as well. And Sergei Bobrovsky, I mean, yeah, the ice tilted a little bit as far as the possession game for the Maple Leafs. Sergei Bobrovsky, incredible, 51 to 53 on the night. This was his series, Josh, and he kept the Florida Panthers in it. And even in the one loss, the Sergei Bobrovsky looked outstanding. And this is what you pay $10 million for the 2-time Vezina Trophy winner.
Well, I mean, it's so funny. Like Panther fans, we're such a fickle bunch. We as soon as they lost game 4, it was like burn it all down. It's all over. Toronto's going to come back. And I remember I talked to probably 10, 15 people the next day about it, and some of them were saying that stuff. I'm like, look, they lost a 1-goal game. It was a 1-goal game in game 4. It was a 1-goal game, and it wasn't a bad game. But if it was an 8-0 game, then you go, oh, well, that's not good. But it's a 1-goal game, and yeah, you're not going to win every playoff game. For Panthers fans, I know we're not used to this. I know we're not used to being in the playoffs and winning series. But yeah, you don't win every playoff game. It's just not how it works. You don't sweep every series. It's just not that way it works. So, the fact that we lost that game on game 4 did not dissuade me at all. But part of that confidence was Sergei Bobrovsky, like you mentioned. I mean, Sergei Bobrovsky just decided to be good at hockey like about a month ago. I think he woke up one morning, he ate his Honey Nut Cheerios. He probably like puts chocolate milk or something in them. I don't know what he does. He looked at his wife across the breakfast table and said, I think I'm just going to be the best goalie in the world from now on. Just, next couple weeks, just going to not just be unbeatable. And she was like, okay, sounds good. And that's what he's doing. And you have to love this for Bob, because if you think about it, Bob's old. I mean, let's be real. He's an older guy. This is probably his last chance to really, at least, possibly his last chance to really try to win a Stanley Cup. And for all the up and down moments that Bob has had in his career in Florida, and there's been some more down moments than there's been up ones. This is the moment that you pay the last $40 million that we've put in his bank account for. And that's to win games in big moments. And he's doing it right now. And I'm here for it. You know what I mean? I'm here for it.
I am as well. And the Panthers, something we spoke about in just even before this series started was what the Panthers needed to do in this series compared to what they were doing in the Boston series, which was, in the Boston series that they couldn't be 59% on the PK in that series, but in this one they went 9 of 11 on the PK. Trying to do quick math here, but that's over 80% on the PK for the Panthers, and just the shooting lanes that were non-existent a lot of the time in this series as well. And the Panthers, this was against the second best power play unit in the entire league, and the Panthers got more power play goals than they had. They finished this series 3 for 9 on the power play. That's the quick math. That's a third for those at home listening. So the Panthers out like being better in the special teams category. Of course, we spoke all about that forecheck for the Panthers all series, and even at times when also, Josh, I think regardless of everything, I think Joseph Woll came onto the scene in the NHL for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He gave them a chance to win once he came in, and they props to Joseph Woll on the other side for not making it easy for Florida.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, when we talked about, playing the Toronto Maple Leafs, so many people were asking me. You and I haven't had a show since then, but so many people were asking me, what do you think? What do you think? Toronto's pretty good. They got Austin Matthews, they got Mitch Marner, they got William Nylander, they got, and I just kept saying, well, you don't know what they don't have. What's that? A goalie. Like they don't have a goalie. You know what I mean? And so you look at the situation for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like I know that the Toronto echo chamber, it's hard not to hear the echoes in their media. But like, can we just be honest? I mean, Ilya Samsonov is not a good goaltender.
We knew that from last year.
Matt Murray couldn't make the Ottawa Senators. And Joseph Woll, I think prior to coming in game 4 or 3 or whatever it was, he had only played 8 NHL games. Is that correct?
7, but you're close enough.
Come on. I mean, that's the thing with Toronto. And this is why, if I'm a Toronto Maple Leaf fan, and thank God I'm not tonight, I'm seriously concerned about the direction of this team with goaltending. And I know you want to give props to Woll, and I think any goaltender can have a moment, right? But it's not like he won these. It's not like he won game 4 for them. You know what I mean? It's
Game 4, no. Game 5, he made it hard for the Panthers.
Completely average. I think Samsonov is 5-10 in his playoff career, and I think 8 of those losses are to the Panthers, something like that. Like 7 of them, whatever. It's just he's not a good goalie. So the Toronto Maple Leafs, the amount of arrogance just oozing out of that franchise is astonishing to me for how little they've done. And I hope that they learn something from all this.
Yeah. And they got their first round demons out of them, but it's definitely left a definite bad taste in their mouth as they are out in 5 games. And the worst part is that they lose on their home ice. So it's crazy to it's hard to process that loss if you're a Maple Leafs fan who paid for a ticket, and of course those top executives from Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment as well. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to discuss more about this game. We're going to discuss more about our feelings and the Panthers advancing, and certain players that the Panthers have been able to shut down that maybe caught us by surprise now that this series is completed. We're going to discuss that more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're going to tell you all about eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part fit just right. So next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guarantee Fit, you can be sure that every part you need fits right. First time around, just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know where it'll fit, or your money back. Just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop at eBay Motors. With over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusion apply. Segment number 2 here on this Saturday, May 13th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, where we are discussing a 3-2 overtime win for the Florida Panthers over the Toronto Maple Leafs. I got former host of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, Josh Luecht, here on the show. And if you're watching on YouTube, you could see that his Avi is a still image of when Josh went viral last year for the Panthers versus Washington Capitals game when they won in that comeback fashion when they were down 3-0 against the Capitals, where they eventually went out to a 3-2 series lead at that time. So if you're wondering why that's still a still image, that is where that happens to be from. But Josh, like we said, Panthers go out to a 2-0 lead in this one. Aaron Ekblad gets on the power play, and then it was a constant theme of mishandling the puck for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Timothy Liljegren mishandles it, and then beauty of a 3-on-2 for the Panthers to get it from Duke to Carter Hagee, and then nothing Joseph Woll could do on that one. And of course the rebound control for Sergei Bobrovsky was great, and it got so desperate at the time that players like Michael Bunting and Mitch Marner were trying a little too hard to draw calls where they were. I remember there was one where Ekblad is battling with Michael Bunting near the boards, and then he loses his stick, and then he just stops playing, and there's no call there as well. But and it's crazy that the moments that happen in this game. I mean, the Maple Leafs, their first goal of the game, works it up to the point. A shot by Morgan Rielly deflects off of Nick Cousins' shin into the net, and then the craziest part of this game was that 9-minute review towards the end of the second period, which the Panthers get a little lost in their own zone. Which, if you look at that replay again, it was Mark Stahl who loses the track of the puck, and William Nylander drives to the net. Sergei Bobrovsky stops the puck. It was hard for me to hear the whistle on the broadcast, but once he lifts his leg, then it goes past the goal line. So took a little bit of a long time to review, but what do you think when that part of the game happened? Because I was starting to get a little nervous, but then we saw, but Sergei Bobrovsky wouldn't have gotten up if he didn't hear a whistle.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I think that in the playoffs everything is amplified, but in the regular season, nobody I think would have thought twice about that situation. I mean, we saw it many times this season where the puck was under the pad, but the pad did go in with several different games. So the whistle is what it is. I don't know. The whole idea of like intent to blow is kind of a funny concept in hockey. But for those who don't know, if the ref intended to blow the whistle, even if he doesn't get it to his lips, it's considered dead. And, that's just the way it is. We talk about lucky bounces in this game. I don't think that was one of them. I think that was just a situation where Bob made the save, and, that's it. I mean, you got to make the right call. And that's where, it comes down to, do I think that the Leafs got some bias in this series from officiating? Yeah, I do. I do think in the first 2 games, there was some bias. Power plays were uneven. There was some things that didn't get called. But at the end of the day, Toronto can't, undo that, situation. They can't just give the Leafs a goal because they like them. They'd rather have them in the Eastern Conference Final. It's just not the way it works. So, That's the situation with that. And the thing I liked about this game tonight, to be honest with you, the most is just that they just kept coming. The Panthers are relentless in that. They just keep coming. And Bob is a big part of that. I think he put up over the series, he put up like a 965 save percentage. He was really, really good. And on the other side of the puck, Kachuk and Barkov, they were active in this series, but they weren't the drivers. This series, in my mind, ended up being depth against depth, and our depth.
Mhm. Yeah, and I was watching Barkov a lot in this one specifically, where a lot of I felt like the noise was very high for Barkov when of him not getting on the score sheet, but a lot of times when the puck was loose, I saw Barkov as the first guy to get there as far as trying to break the puck out of the Panthers' zone. I'm like, okay, there's the Selke Trophy winner that we know and love, Alexander Barkov. They're quick to pucks as well, and of course the patience that Matthew Tkachuk always has once he gets the puck at the blue line, and then waiting for his teammates to go to get into the zone for like give and goes and all that stuff, and of course getting behind the net and then getting in his opponent's face as well. And with of course we're not going to make too much of one bad goal for Sergei Bobrovsky on the one that tied the game, which that it's funny because that tying goal that William Nylander actually scored, the one that he actually did, takes a little bit Brendan Montour to a little bit of an angle, and then doesn't have Henrik Lundqvist spoke about how he was expecting probably a wraparound and wasn't square to the shooter. We're not gonna trash on Bob too much. We have no right to after the series that he had, but the moment that the Panthers in overtime, which of course they get a power play, which TJ Brody knocks it into the Panthers bench on the puck over glass. Paul Maurice calls that timeout, which it's such smart coaching for Paul Maurice to call that timeout, because even before he did, I was thinking power play one is not going to get off the ice whatsoever in this situation. With the Panthers getting a rare power play. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. That was the first power play in the game in the overtime, the puck over glass. That was the first power play since 13:02 in the first period. Penalties are hard to come by in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And of course, with a puck over glass, like there's not much of it's not like you can rescind that. TJ Brody's stick obviously gets in the air, and then it knocks it out. Almost pulled a Jonas Siegenthaler about what happened with the New Jersey Devils in Game 5 of the Carolina series. But the Panthers getting that extended power play, of course, they don't score. Matthew Tkachuk actually tries a between the legs goal. Of course, Justin Hall is there to break it up before he could even get it on net. But the fact that the Panthers were able to stop that rush by the Toronto Maple Leafs and then go on to counterattack themselves, and my goodness, what a screen by Radko Gudas, a veteran move. They knew that they had the blue jerseys back. They were going on the rush, and then Nick Cousins, the toe drag to wait for that open shooting lane, and then beating Joseph Woll. My goodness, it was just jubilation, joy, you name it, for that moment. And Nick, like I've said this on the show, Nick Cousins played 17 playoff games for the Vegas Golden Knights a few years ago. And this is the thing, Josh. Nick Cousins is here for one more year after this year too. So it's great to have him in the role that he's in.
Yeah, I mean he's there. He's gonna be a part of the team another year, but he's a grinder, and he's got that grinder mindset, and that's the situation that the Panthers need, guys like that. And in the regular season, I don't think anybody would have said, hey, yeah, Nick Cousins, he's going to be a playoff overtime hero for the Panthers. I just don't think that's what we were thinking.
No, I wasn't.
But he's been a grinder, and I love that play by Radko Gudas. I love the image that's been going around of him screaming into Woll's face as they win. I mean, how can you not love Radko Gudas? Now, in fairness, if he wasn't on my team, I'd hate him, but he is on my team and I love it. I love the way he plays the game. I love that those depth guys, like I said earlier, are the ones that are getting it done for the Panthers. And that just shows that, or at least it hints at that this is sustainable. This is sustainable, like to continue to push. And, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about Carolina here, but this is a sustainable brand of hockey. And I would like to publicly apologize to Paul Maurice for things I said and thought about him, because I was definitely not on Team Maurice this season, but he did what he said he was going to do. He taught them how to play and win in the playoffs. And, well, I mean, good job, Paul. Good job. There's no one I'm happier for than Paul Maurice. I'm sure you've seen the video and the photo of Luongo and Bill Zito jumping up and screaming and shouting and celebrating. I saw that as it was happening on the broadcast. There's no one I'm happier for than those guys. Those guys knew what they were doing. And even when we didn't think they did, they had a plan. They stuck to the plan. And here we are in the freaking Eastern Conference Finals against the Carolina Hurricanes. Insane.
And it just goes back to this one thing where it's about this one word, process. It just comes out. It comes down to that word, which, when the going gets tough in the middle of the season and you're questioning why they're making their decisions and why they brought someone in, and this was supposed to be their setback year with all the dead cap that they have on their books and all, and the guy to drive the ship, to put the anchor down when needed to, when you're at your destination, and someone trustworthy like a Paul Maurice, and the whole regular, again, I'm going to say this once again, the whole, if people are going to make arguments about his regular season losses, you don't get that many regular season losses without coaching that many games, obviously. So I've always found that as like a lazy take as far as Coach Maurice, but it's all about process, and it's all about, okay, what do you need to adjust one day that doesn't work to the next, and as well as, is, even if it's not going right, do you go back to somewhat to a pairing, especially, for example, the third line with Reinhart and Lundell, knowing that they worked together well last year, versus, and also adjusting to injuries as well, because let's not forget as well, 20 players on this roster to start the season where you couldn't have any scratches because of cap issues as well, and dealing with all of that as well, adjusting to Aaron Ekblad injury early on, which credit to Brandon Montour on the season that he's had as well, stepping up when needed to, when Mackenzie Weegar was traded out of, as far as the Kachuk trade as well, and also veteran leadership as well, as far as the Stahl brothers as well. I know we have our criticisms mostly of Mark Stahl, I mean, at least from my end, but guys who have been there before, who know that, this might be a little bit of a tougher year. This is going to be a transition, but these guys are here to help you guys get through these growing pains of a new coach, and different challenges, because now looking back at it, if you were to give a contract to Huberdeau and Weegar, those guys being at the tail end of 20, going into their 30s, the Panthers, not only they closed their window, and this window was supposed to be slightly open this year, still open, but slightly. But now it's it's for the most part knocked down. I know the mission's not over yet, but it's mostly knocked down as of right now.
Hey, listen, we're halfway there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And yeah, I mean, window for regroup and figure out some contracts. And I think that was everyone's attitude going into this year. And Matthew Tkachuk was like, "No, I think we're just going to try to win," and that's what happened. I mean, I'll tell you, the moment in this season that I really feel like everything changed is kind of a really unique moment for me because, as you know, I went on a road trip this year to see the Panthers, and we ended up in Toronto in March. And my wife and I were trying to go see all 32 rinks. We've been to 25 out of the 32, so we've got 7 left. And so part of that was we went to Toronto to see the Panthers play the Leafs. You guys probably remember that game where the Panthers scored exactly 1 minute into the game, and then with 1 minute left in the game, and then won. And the Panthers, it was quite an experience to be there. But that morning was the morning where Keith Tkachuk came on Toronto radio and called the Panthers soft. And it was like a light bulb turned on for the Panthers in that moment. So maybe we give Keith Tkachuk an assist. But all of a sudden, it's like everything that lit a fire under Matthew Tkachuk to have his dad say that about him. And, no one's saying that about the Panthers now. Nobody's saying the Panthers are soft.
And I also think about what Matthew Tkachuk is willing to tell his dad as well, knowing that his brother is in the same division, and private conversations and saying, "Hey, don't tell Brady on what's going on in our locker room. This is confidential," and all that stuff, or what to say in a group setting when he does have his brother around. Something a little bit to think about too when it comes to the whole family, and of course being in the same division as well. And I just wonder what motivated Keith Tkachuk as well to say that on Toronto radio. And it's like, Keith Tkachuk probably knows something that obviously we don't know. So looking back at it, man, was that the best thing for the Panthers? Man, just it's still hard to believe that they are here. They're 8 wins through this the Stanley Cup playoffs, and 27 years since they have been in the Eastern Conference Final, where they will be facing the Carolina Hurricanes, which is a good opportunity for us to transition to segment number 3, which we are going to discuss not only the series against the Carolina Hurricanes, but we are going to discuss what was the point in the series where we knew that the Florida Panthers were going to win this series. We're going to discuss that next year on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Third and final segment here on this Saturday, May 13th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. I got Josh Luecht, the former host of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, where the Florida Panthers are coming off a 3-2 overtime win over the Toronto Maple Leafs, where they punched their ticket to the Eastern Conference Final. And like we teased in the previous segment, we're talking about pre-recording. What was our moment in which we kind of knew that the Florida Panthers were going to win this series? And I'm going to go first. My moment was in game 2, actually, where the Florida Panthers trailed 2-0 against Toronto. They get a goal late in the first, but it was that 47-second difference where they got 2 goals to take the lead, and they never backed down from there, and they were able to win that game 3-2 in regulation. And that was my moment that the Florida Panthers, I knew once they got those 2 road wins that they were gonna find a way to win this series over the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm like, man, that was their first win in this series that they fell behind and won. And crazy stat, Josh, the Florida Panthers, they're 6-0 when they score first. They did in games 1 and 5 in this series. But game 2 was that moment where I said they're going to win this series.
Wow. I mean, that's such a great moment. And I think that's good. But I'll tell you mine. The moment that I thought the Panthers were going to win this series was the moment that Ilya Samsonov went out.
That's a good one.
The moment that he hit the ice, I was like, oh, that's it. And I know they hadn't even won game 3 yet at that point. But that was the moment where I thought, okay, I think that's demoralizing enough for the Maple Leafs that the Panthers are going to be able to get past this. And I had zero doubt. And I know that sounds crazy in retrospect, but I just had zero doubt the moment that happened that we were going to move on to the Eastern Conference Final. I mean, to the point where I was like, well, if either it's going to be today or it's going to be Sunday, but either we're going to the Eastern Conference Final. And the Panthers, they're coming hot, and they're coming into this next round ready to go, I think, and it's going to be a crazy good round. You want to talk a little bit about what's next?
Yeah, just like this round against the Carolina Hurricanes, and just like the previous round, Toronto already clinched against Tampa Bay prior to the Florida Panthers taking on the Boston Bruins, and my focus was beat Boston, beat Boston, beat Boston. It was the same thing. You knew it was on the other side for if you were able to clinch. And even saying it this morning with Kevin Rodigan from the FLA Catnip podcast, and saying that you needed to treat this like a game 7. And listen, the 2-goal cushion was great for the Panthers. And once again, never trailing in this one as well. And now they face the Carolina Hurricanes. Long live the Southeast Division, Josh, where the Florida Panthers and Carolina Hurricanes spent a good amount of time there. And even the 1-year Central Division that they had, where the Florida Panthers only won 2 games against Carolina, which both of them happened to be overtime wins in the 2021 season. But man, these are 2 teams who have the top 2 scoring blue lines in the entire league too. So that's one thing they have in common. And crazy how both teams had 3 goalies play most of the season. Yeah, I know for the Florida Panthers side of things, Spencer Knight is still not with the team, but these 2 teams have that in common, where they played 3 goalies for a good chunk of the season as well. But man, the Carolina Hurricanes are so defensively responsible around whichever goalie they have in net. And yeah, it's going to be Freddie Anderson who's going to start. He's the veteran. Yeah, Antti Raanta is also a veteran as well. But it's a scary team to face. I mean, Brent Burns is a Norris Trophy winner as well. And chances are, when Barkov is on the ice, you're likely going to see Jordan Staal also on the ice as well for the Carolina Hurricanes side of things. And Jordan Martinook, let's talk about him. He was on waivers earlier this season. Didn't get a single point in the first round, and then he gets 9 points in 6 games for the Carolina Hurricanes. And this guy was on waivers earlier in the season, and he just comes on the scene for Carolina. What a story for him. And they're also doing this with their whole bunch of injuries as well. Of course, we talked about Svechnikov, Pacioretty, Teuvo Teravainen as well. But they're just so well coached, Josh. It's not gonna be an easy matchup whatsoever.
Yeah, we're gonna get some stall on stall action. I think that'll be a lot of fun. I'm sure that's going to be the major storyline on television. But I think the thing to think about when it comes to Carolina is, I think both teams are fairly evenly matched. And it's really going to come down to 2 things in my mind. It's going to come down to goaltending, like you mentioned, and it's going to come down to the forechecking. Carolina's also a pretty good forechecking team.
No doubt.
And I don't think that Florida Panther fans should fear Carolina, but I do think we should respect them.
Yes.
I think they have a great team as well. But this is a team that, even though the Panthers have had their troubles with Carolina, and man, there was years and years and years where it felt like I think we went four seasons without a win against Carolina, back in the Southeast Division days. This is not a juggernaut in the sense that some of these other teams we've already faced are. Like the offensive power of Carolina, I don't think is as good as Toronto's. And I don't think that their defense is that much better than Boston's. I really don't. So it's going to be interesting to see because, it's not, I know it's a level up because we're going to the third round, but I don't know that the team Carolina Hurricanes is that big of a level up over those other two.
That's a fair point. Now that you mention it, and the Panthers were shut out by the Carolina Hurricanes. If I remember on the top of my head, it was December 30th. It was on the second end of a back-to-back after the Florida Panthers just manhandled Montreal after the holiday break, and they gave up 3 power play goals, and then the fourth one was just as the power play was ending, and it was just and one of the season-changing moments also for the Panthers in there was right before the new year. You're on a back-to-back. You usually don't practice on that third day when you're coming back, but Paul Maurice said, "Nope, we're hitting the ice. We're gonna practice." That was as embarrassing of a performance as can be, and that was also another moment in the season that I haven't really spoke about much on the show about how their play was unacceptable during that time. Of course, a lot of growing pains as well for the Panthers as they were just going through it. And of course, another one that I remember was the Florida Panthers blowing out the Hurricanes in at home as well. And also that was when an actual hurricane was actually on its way to South Florida this season, but they still were able to play that game, and the Florida Panthers were able to get a win there. And then of course we know what happened in Game 82, which it's funny because now looking back at it, we look a little foolish about saying, "Oh, you got to win Game 82 to avoid Boston." And it's like, okay, you want to get Carolina or New Jersey in round 1? Well, you got them now, but in a different round. So crazy to think.
Yeah, I mean, what maybe you can look it up while I'm talking, but I'd love to know what the season series was against Carolina. I think
2-1 2-1 Carolina.
Or was it 2 Carolina? I think we can compete with them. I don't think that they're that crazy much better or different than what we just did. And let me ask you a question here. Between those 3 teams, Boston, Toronto, and Carolina, if you could have the offense of any of those 3 teams, which one would you pick?
Toronto.
Okay. If you could have the defense, which one would you pick?
Wow. Slight edge to Boston, but not by much.
Okay. And if you could have the goaltending, which one would you pick?
Boston.
So none of those things you just said was Carolina.
None.
So, I mean, I think that's a good way to think about it, right? I think Toronto has the better offense. I think that the Boston defense and the Carolina defense are pretty even. And I think the goaltending is definitely suspect for Carolina. So, and definitely you're not picking the Toronto goaltenders, you know what I'm saying? So this is I think this is not a bad situation to be in. I don't want to jinx it, but I just think this is a team that we can compete with. This is a team that the Panthers played a lot in the recent past, and it's going to be a crazy good series, I think.
And I'm very excited about it. Chances are with the Miami Heat advancing as well, their Eastern Conference final game will start on Wednesday. So if the NHL did favors for the Panthers, then when it came to conflicts, there's chances are that the Florida Panthers series against Carolina will start either Tuesday or Thursday. And thank goodness that the Florida Panthers will have some extended rest right before Game 1 of the Eastern Conference final in Raleigh, North Carolina. And it's going to be loud at PNC Arena with that little siren. And the best part about tonight is Paul Bissonnette. Shh. That's the best part. That's the best part about tonight. That
man, he was mad about that goal. He was so mad.
So that's the best part about it. So, Josh, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this celebratory edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, where the Panthers advanced to the Eastern Conference Final for the first time since 1996. gonna have to get you on later in the Carolina series, obviously, to have, of course, do a recap and of course talk all about Florida Panthers hockey. But tell everybody where they can follow you online.
Yeah, man, you can follow me online at Josh Loves Hockey on Twitter. And I just want to leave the podcast with one more thought. You got Florida. You got Florida.
Good vibes here on the night. So definitely, and Cats fans, I hope you all have a really great weekend. And I hope that you guys go throughout your day with a big smile on your face. And especially if you guys do see a Maple Leafs fan, that's for sure. But Josh, thank you so much, my friend. And I hope to see you soon, my friend. And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steele Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for the everydayers, make sure to come back on Monday for the Monday's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. We'll be discussing and looking ahead to the Florida Panthers advancing to their first Eastern Conference final since 1996. So I'm Armando Velez with Josh Luecht. And you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.